Welcome to P Passionate W World, R Radio N Network, LLC, a multimedia company. Ann Arbor, Michigan, Boston, Massachusetts, Liverpool, England, Melrose, Florida, Los Angeles, California, Fullerton, California, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois are one of the many broadcast homes of PWRN, a multimedia company. The world in your hands. And now, without further ado, let me present to you one of our many hosts and their programs.
Well, good evening, one and all, and this is Flash Silvermoon for What the Animals Tell Me. And I got a little startled by what I'm called. The show is called What the Animals Tell Me. However, tonight I'm doing a little departure from the animals because it is the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. So I thought, given how heavy life has been for so many of us, that I'd share something kind of uplifting for a change. So here we go. And it's really hard to wrap my head around the fact that Woodstock happened 50 years ago, August 15, 1969, and they say that if you can remember the 60s and what they were really like, then you weren't really there. But I beg to differ. It amazes me that my memories of those days, and particularly Woodstock, are as vivid as they were yesterday. It's really, considering the substances that flowed through my system that weekend, it's even more amazing. There were 2 festivals occurring in my neighborhood that month, and I knew I could only manage to get to one of them. Fortunately, I took the right choice. The Goddess and the Muses told me to go to Woodstock, and that was certainly the festival to go to. During the summer of '69, I had gone cross-country to California and actually saw and met Grace Slick singing at the Fillmore West. She was with the Jefferson Airplane there in San Francisco. She and Janice were my idols, and I was still flying high from the experience by the time I returned to New Jersey and prepared for Woodstock. I mention this adventure in California because while waiting online to get into the airplane concert, a funny little man saw me at the front of the line and asked me to save him a seat next to me, and he'd give me some really good dope. I'm figuring. I said, sure, what the hell, I figured he'd give me a joint. So I went inside, and he came in and sat next to me, and he gave me this little purple pill that I immediately tucked into my amethyst poison ring for just the right occasion. I was actually traveling with my parents, so it was clearly not the right time. So I write this in part saying, are you crazy taking this from a stranger? But you must understand that those were different days. And amongst the circles of folks that I traveled, people still had honor and trust in such things. I didn't know until a few years ago, while viewing a picture book on the 60s, that the little man was actually Owsley, the most infamous acid maker of the Merry Prankster and rock and roll fame. So as I packed my knapsack for Woodstock, I remembered the magic that had been patiently waiting for me inside the poison ring and slid it on my finger with a chuckle. I knew my way around psychedelics by this time and knew enough to know that they were not to be taken lightly, or heavily for that matter. One wanted to be sure that the energy and environment would support a good trip, because once you dropped, life would not be the same for about 8 hours or so. I never had a bad trip, and I never abused the sacrament of good LSD either, as some surely did back in the day. My sojourn on that magic carpet ended when I felt that I had experienced all that I had to offer from, I just said, all right, I'm done with this. And that was the end of me with the hallucinogens. But my knapsack was well prepared with a little food and a clean T-shirt, matches, flashlight, dungaree, packs. I used some of it, but I ate very little food. I just wasn't that hungry. I was and never have been a big camper, so I approached this adventure with both excitement and a little apprehension. No one really knew at the time that the festival would blow up the way that it did. Being intuitive, I had a really good feeling this was going to be an event of a lifetime, and my intuition was right on the money. Astrologically, this time was a blessed window to higher consciousness, with the outer planets Neptune and Pluto in a harmonious sextile. This aspect could elevate and transform the energies of the masses in a most idealistic and mystical way, and it did. The drugs Neptune ruled were all about opening and getting in the core of things, which Pluto likes to get to the very radical or root of the energy. With the positive relationship between those two planets, the highest, most utopian ideals would prevail. Conversely, just a few years later, when those two planets were in a square formation with each other, the culture switched to substances and cultish groups that would numb and quell the desire for rebellion. Words fail to adequately express the purity and blissfulness of the energy that went over the thousands who huddled together in the rain and mud that weekend. But I firmly believe that from the fertile ground, some of our highest aspirations seeded and have manifested now in many of the movements for change and earth healing. And that's why it sort of fits with the subject, too, of the animals. As I view the chart of that weekend, I notice that the moon, Uranus, and Jupiter were all conjoined in Libra, the sign of peace and harmony. With these aspects on board, it's little wonder that Woodstock manifested a huge blossoming of peace, love, and understanding in a most cosmic and expansive way, with the most perfect vehicle, electric music. The angels had set the stage for the greatest show on earth and well beyond. And these were not angels from hell as in the later Altamont Festival. This was a time of sacred meeting, of soul connections, and overflowing of heart energy, which is precisely what we need right now as we approach the eclipse. I remember piling into Pepe's car that Thursday with my friends, and we had sleeping bags and tents and very little room, but our Chevy got us there, filled with anticipation. Our car seemed to be jet-propelled as rock and roll and weed waited. It just wafted from our open windows on the Jersey Turnpike, disappearing under the wheels. We cosmic kitties made our way to the New York Thruway, which was still open at that point. It was good that we made an early departure because not long after, the Thruway was closed. By the time we got within 2 hours of the location, the Thruway was jammed, creating a bumper-to-bumper caravan of hippies and freaks inching along on our pilgrimage to the promised land. The movement was so slow, in fact, that some people pulled over, laying out their blankets and coolers on the side of the road. I mean, this was some very amazing time. They're sitting there offering brownies, mushrooms, anything to feed your head. Some rode on the tops of their cars, passing joints and food from car to car, and to the people on the roadside, the highway. The sharing and communal vibe had begun long before we hit Yasgur's farm, and everywhere you looked, you could just see smiling faces. Our joy was so contagious that even folks who were stuck with us and were not going to even get to the festival were joining in the fun. I actually met my friend, Juana Weaver, whom I hadn't seen in 2 years. She was sitting on the side of the road. I got out, we hugged and swore to find each other at the festival, and I don't think we ever did, but no surprise there. It was dark when we finally got there and found a spot to at least park, and turned out we'd wound up in a cow pasture, which was turned into a parking lot. And that would be the only night of sleep until Monday evening when I was back in my bed in New Jersey. Who could sleep at a time like this anyway, when there was just so much magic to discover? The sun rose over a purple haze of campers, tie-dye, and nothing all greeting like the morning groggy, but I was elated. I hustled my crew back into the car that we could get a good spot, and we wound up located on a little hill where the helicopters were coming in and bringing in the performers, as driving became impossible and caused many changes in the lineup as the performers just couldn't even get there. The music would not start until much later. I decided that I would just be wandering around for a little while, just discovering what the whole place was looking like and discovering what the magic in the purple ring was like as I took the little pill. I told my friends what I was up to so that they could keep an eye on me if necessary. Oddly, and quite ironically, I wound up taking the most solo and ecstatic trip ever in the middle of thousands of people. I wandered around the festival grounds with a huge grin pasted on my face, passing Groovy Lane, High Road, and the like. Many artisans had brought beautiful pieces to sell or barter in the crafts area, and it was the most magical place to be, filled with colorful tie-dyes, dream catchers, jewelry, even furniture. The hog farmers, a collective from the West Coast, were nearby, passing out plates of what I started calling Woodstock stew, which consisted of raw oats with raisins, nuts, powdered milk, and if you're really lucky early on, a little honey. Everyone shared and gave to each other, and again, words fail to really express what it was like to be inside this cocoon of love. People really cared about each other's welfare. If you were having a bad trip, there was a tent with several volunteers, medical and otherwise, to talk you down. It was starting to get really hot, and I was wondering if this pill had taken its effect. Was the potency any good? Was anything going to happen? And I came to the prankster buses at the Grateful Dead's campsite. These yellow school buses were painted with serpent-like paisleys of every color, and when I looked at them for a moment, I could see the serpents and all their colors beginning to move all over in wave-like motion. It was official. I had gotten off. I probably stood there for a while enchanted by the dancing snakes on the bus, as well as the children, naked, listening to the Dead as they noodled around on their guitars and some other instruments. I thought that my head would explode when I put it under the ice-cold shower for a much-needed chill. My muscles tightened, and I could feel that I was getting higher and higher and that it would be best for me to head back to my camp area where I could just be still and not have to function too much to find it. And so we need to take a little break, and I'll be right back with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Robertson, host of TV Confidential. Thank you so much for listening to our program on PWRN, Passionate World Radio Network. If you like TV Confidential or any of the other programs you hear every week on PWRN, please consider supporting this station by becoming a patron of Passionate World Radio Network through Patreon. It is easy to do. It won't cost you more than a few dollars per month. And best of all, you will help PWRN continue to educate, enlighten, and entertain our global audience of 10 million strong and growing. For more information, go to patreon.com/PWRN. That's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/PWRN. And thank you again for listening.
Okay, right back to Woodstock for you. I was most relieved to find our space and my friends and decided to lie down in the grass and just feel the amazing feelings that were coursing through my body, lying on my belly, exploring the blades of grass that lay before me. I was swept into a deep internal space where everything that I saw became first huge, towering over me, and then tiny enough for me to see every molecule. My consciousness continued this telescoping in and out, and I heard the music of the spheres. I had heard about it, knew that it existed, but I never expected to hear it. But that's what it was. I heard the sounds of the bugs and the tiniest little things, and just bathing in that sound, it changes a person. And indeed, I felt initiated into some mystical cosmic order, and I do believe that I was. Many hours had passed since I had entered the psychedelic cafe of Purple Owlsley, and I was beginning to enter the normal world, if you can say that the savory soup of stoned-out hippies normal. However, compared to where I had been, this was terra firma. I must have eaten a bite or two of something, but I can't honestly remember, except anything but Woodstock stew. The concert was trying to start, and we moved closer, actually. I was a mere 10 feet from the stage the entire time, as they sound-checked and did public announcements, missing children, don't take the brown acid, and the highways were closed at this point. So the musicians were having a really hard time getting there. The show was supposed to start with a band called Sweetwater, but they wound up having to start Richie Havens first because Sweetwater wasn't there yet. And there he was, playing his acoustic guitar, feeling like a motherless child, singing about freedom, singing about Handsome Johnny with his hand clenched in a fist, going to the Vietnam War. His shouts moved the crowd to a fever pitch. We knew what he was singing about, and we were just living again the pain of a senseless war that took out our friends in their prime. On the plains of Woodstock, an army of lovers was being conscripted to fight the power, to show that peace was the answer. Our uniforms were as colored and varied as we were, and some were non-existent. We were living our beliefs in living color, and as Dave Crosby said, letting our freak flags fly. Sweetwater finally got there, and they were wonderful. And Bert Summers sang hauntingly beautiful music, Tim Hardin, heroin and whiskey-soaked words about the bird on the wire wafted from the humongous speakers. Rumors of Dylan and Beatles were bandied about, but never manifested. We didn't care. Arlo Guthrie brought us Alice's Restaurant and a couple of keys flying in from Los Angeles. A very off-key, incredible string band whined through a lackluster set a little later. Didn't care for them. But everything at this fest took longer than you would expect, partly because of the unexpected numbers, mechanical failures, weather, all that. Joan Baez closed the show Friday night and blew my mind. There she was, one woman with a guitar and a couple of acoustic sidemen playing to this throng of rockers. Her voice was pure and crystal clear, and her message tugged at our hearts. Her husband, David, was newly incarcerated as a conscientious objector to the war and had been on a hunger strike to organize the inmates in his prison. She urged us all to become more active in and the way that we could in fighting against this cruel war. When she sang her final number, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, a cappella, you could hear a pin drop as her voice rang out over the enormous crowd. Of all of the performances, and I saw them all, here was one of the most impressive. And I was not so much a fan of hers exactly. I was more of a rock fan, but she just really took the cake that night. Because I didn't want to lose my incredible spot so close to the stage, I volunteered to stay there overnight, curled up on my soggy sleeping bag. I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared to be there. Everybody was your brother, your sister, your friend. Everybody looked out for everybody else. There was no need to be concerned. For one blessed weekend, we all were living the dream. Anyone who knows anything about magic knows that you must live into your vision to make it manifest. And we danced the dream. I hope into life for 3 glorious days. Saturday brought drenching rain. We were either broiling in the summer sun or rain-soaked and chilled. But again, most of us were not at all discouraged. Some of it could have been the music, the marijuana haze that hung several feet thick over the audience, but most of it was really the energy and the oneness that we all felt as a group. I think that Santana opened a show on Saturday afternoon, and this was their debut. Carlos led the group in a blistering set and was clearly on fire with inspiration from his audience and the spirits. I had never seen such wonderful percussion in a rock band before, and you must remember that this was truly the golden age of rock music, and many forms were just swirling around in the cauldron of the muses that many had never seen before. If you look really hard during Santana's Soul Sacrifice segment in the Woodstock movie, you can see me with my head bobbing around in the crowd, just grooving to the Latin rhythms. Seems like John Sebastian came on next, totally blown away, at least by the magnitude of the crowd and its energy. When Ravi Shankar took the stage with Ali Akbar Khan on tabla, my heart nearly skipped a beat. I had never seen them, but loved their music, and it was absolutely balm for my soul as I lied down to let the sounds of the sitar, tambura, and tabla wash over me. So many intricate tones and scales not present in Western music, as the ragas brought me to an inner peace that I'd never known before. There was a guru, Swami Satchidananda, didn't care that much for that. And all through the day, musicians would start to play and often would be chased away off the stage with just terrible rain. This happened to Country Joe and the Fish and Country Joe without the fish on Saturday, who surely must have felt like he was fixing to die as he sang, very waterlogged, fish chant. Watch the bouncing blue ball, and it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. Well, we were all singing and screaming out together, and it was quite the time. And I have to take one more break, and I'll be right back with more of Woodstock.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Robertson, host of TV Confidential. Thank you so much for listening to our program on PWRN, Passionate World Radio Network. If you like TV Confidential or any of the other programs you hear every week on PWRN, please consider supporting this station by becoming a patron of Passionate World Radio Network through Patreon. It is easy to do. It won't cost you more than a few dollars per month. And best of all, you will help PWRN continue to educate, enlighten, and entertain our global audience of 10 million strong and growing. For more information, go to patreon.com/PWRN. That's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/PWRN. And thank you again for listening.
Okay, right back with you. Back to Woodstock with Flash Silvermoon, What the Animals Tell Me. And they're chanting, no rain, over and over. And apparently the goddess was turning a deaf ear because it continued to rain. Hugh Romney, head of the hog farmers, croaked out over the mic, we must be in heaven. There's always a little bit of heaven in a disaster area. And we were a disaster area. The governor had to call out the National Guard, and I have remembered that phrase of his on many occasions. Were the paranoid politicos wrong when they raised their clenched fist to the sky, railing against the government that had seeded the clouds to make it rain? We'll never know. At some point, the Guard did drop clean clothes and food on us from large helicopters. We were, reminded over the mic that the Army was with us. And again, we were all one. Time and space won't allow me to tell you everything that happened, but the evening lineup for Saturday was one for the books. Canned Heat, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Mountain, The Grateful Dead, Sly and the Family Stone, Janis Joplin, and the Jefferson Airplane. I think that the Dead must have gotten some of the bad brown acid because they were pretty often out of sync. Sly took us higher and higher, getting everyone on their feet, dancing to the music. Janis, who is and was by far one of my all-time faves, she was not in her greatest voice, due no doubt to overwork and overplay. But that being said, this woman on an off day was better than most anybody else on her best day. She was wearing this gorgeous magenta, purple, and turquoise tie-dyed velvet outfit. She and the Cosmic Blues Band, with Snooky Flowers, the baritone sax player, rocked the house with her comfort-saturated vocals, delivering every little piece of her heart and then some. No ball and chain could keep this sister down, even on this misty 3 a.m. stage. Believe me, nobody was sleeping. Grace Slick was a sight for sore eyes when she emerged with the Jefferson Airplane, just as the sun rose over the semi-conscious crowd. It was 6 a.m., and they had clearly been tripping all night, like many of their fans. And she said, we were, and it still is great. One of my favorite things to do at an airplane concert was to listen to the scorched sarcasms of Grace's voice in between songs. This morning, she didn't disappoint. Tan skin against a white-fringed outfit, she exclaimed, good morning, people. You've seen the heavy bands, and now you'll hear morning maniac music. Pow! They launched into Volunteers of America, and look what's happened on the street. Got a revolution. Got a revolution, we shouted back, having clenched fists in the air. After a full night of rock and weed, this crowd was ready to tear down the walls, everyone together. We can be together. Fomenting Rebellion was the name of that tune, And when we weren't busy with that, we were finding somebody to love down the White Rabbit Hole or elsewhere as Saturday night turned into Sunday morning. By this time, there was very little difference between the sleeping bag underneath me and the ground. Both were soaked and just caked in mud. And, there wasn't any walking around. Everything was just a mess, but I didn't care. Only occasionally saw my friends who were intent on sleeping in the tent and keeping earlier hours. And it didn't really matter, though, because everyone there was my friend, and I never gave it a second thought. I can remember exactly who opened the show Sunday morning because, again, the rain caused a number of false starts. But Country Joe and the Fish were warming us up with tunes and chants. And, oh, goodness, we had Joe Cocker and Running Out of Time, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And Jimi Hendrix finished the show. And I must say, the only sour note in the entire event was from Pete Townsend of The who took his guitar and slapped Abbie Hoffman off the stage, knocked him right off the stage with his guitar because Abbie got up to speak his mind. So I just have to say that. And Jimmy was beyond wonderful. He was just, he played for 2 hours and then said, well, you can all leave, I'm only jamming, and played another hour. And sounds of Purple Haze, Foxy Lady, screaming from the Marshall amps, and Star Spangled Banner, making that Telecaster shriek and wail the pain in his soul, was not on ice like Eldridge Cleaver and not bound to any political line. The bombs were bursting in air, and it was wonderful. He just absolutely blew my mind. And I hope that this gives you all a little taste about what Woodstock was like. I just was amazed by it. I still have, believe it or not, the program that was printed, and in that program they had a hexagram of the I Ching, hexagram 16 from the I Ching. It graced the back of the program, and it reflected the energy. Joy and relief make themselves felt. So too, music has the power to ease tension within the heart and to loosen the grip of obscure emotions. The enthusiasm of the heart expressed itself involuntarily in a burst of song, in dance and rhythmic movement of the body. And I will close the show with that little message from the I Ching, and hope that you have all really enjoyed this program. Good night. This is Flash Silvermoon.
Thank you for listening to Passionate World Radio Network, a multimedia company. You can listen to this program all over again at PassionateWorldRadioNetwork.com, Facebook.com/PWRN, Twitter.com/PWRN, GooglePlus.com/PWRN. Distinguish yourself from the ordinary. And remember, please keep listening.